So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about some of the myths around international development, some of the things that I've heard, to try to dispel some of these myths and really present an honest look at what it means to work in international development. So the first thing I often hear is something along the lines of, I can't wait to meet Bono. Of course, the lead singer for the band U2, who's very involved in international development and aid. And to be quite honest, the truth of international development work is that it's just like any other job. It's usually unglamorous. It's usually mundane work on a day-to-day basis. And yes, there are incredibly rewarding things about it, but day-to-day, you're not necessarily interacting with celebrities and putting together splashy marketing campaigns with rubber bracelets. The second thing I often hear is, isn't an MBA just enough? As an MBA holder myself, we are very proud of our degrees, of the rigorous process that it requires to not only get accepted into business school, but to graduate with a degree. The truth, though, is just like any other field of work, there are, this is an area, international development is an area that requires deep specialization and technical expertise. Yes, your MBA is a valuable degree and it is valuable in the field. It, however, is not the only degree that is valuable. And to be quite honest, if you have an MBA, I would almost encourage you, after you've broken into the field of international development, to consider going back for another degree, or at least to take classes in your area of specialization. The next thing that we generally hear is something along the lines of, I built a school in Africa, and isn't that great? Yes. I don't mean to discount or diminish the value of building a school in Africa. At the same time, donors and development organizations are really expecting to see measurable outcomes, not just outputs. Right? An output is a physical school has been built. An outcome is that now these kids are more educated, which means they can get better jobs, which means better livelihoods and a better future for their children. Right? So it's building a home, building a school, donating clothes. These are all things that treat acute problems. They do not, however, treat the chronic situation and provide long-term sustainable solutions. Lastly is this lovely idea of just wanting to help poor people. And again, this is noble, and it's a driving reason why I was involved in international development and still am. However, it's not, the work itself is not about the great feeling that you have for helping people in need. It's really about a commitment to change the system. And changing a system is hard work, and it takes a long time. You're not going to see, in many cases, instant results that are going to make you feel good about the work that you're doing, on a monthly, quarterly basis. These things take a long time. So I just wanted to take it. There are more that I could have thrown on here, and more I'm sure that you've heard. But if you have any other questions as well, I'm happy to take them at the end. But this is just setting the stage for what international development work is really like. A very quick overview of the industry and who the players are. Let's start on the left here with the multilateral organizations. These are the big groups like the UN Development Program, UNDP, the World Bank, the IDB. These are supranational organizations. They're made up of representatives from multiple countries, and they give out billions of dollars of aid every year. The next group are bilateral organizations. Bilateral because the money usually flows from one country's government to another organization or another country's government. So these are organizations like USAID, is the U.S. version. In the UK, you have the Department for International Development, or DFID. Again, big players in the international development field, and players to watch to see where the trends are, what the research trends are, and what they're showing. Next is probably the group that is most familiar to many of you. These are civil society organizations, private individuals or organizations that are often nonprofit. They're also called non-governmental organizations because they are independent of government. However, many of them, or in fact probably most of them, receive government funding, and many of them want to work alongside the governments in the countries in which they're working. Examples of these are big name groups like the Clinton Foundation, my former employer, the Gates Foundation, CARE, but it also includes the smaller grassroots organizations. One that I've been working with for a number of years now is called One Home, Many Hopes. They're teeny tiny, and they focus work on supporting about 60 girls in coastal Kenya with home, shelter, food, and education. So they all count as CSOs, NGOs, that's this category here. The next are the research institutions. They're the ones focused on scientific study and research. Johns Hopkins has a great program. In the UK, there's another great one called the Overseas Development Institute. They fund fellows, I think, for a year or 2 years to do research and to work with governments in developing nations. And lastly, our private sector organizations. These tend to be profit-seeking organizations that work in international development. Chemonics, DAI, John Snow, these are big ones who often are subcontracted by bilateral organizations or multilateral organizations to do the work at hand. But they are private, they are profit-seeking organizations. And then just as a note at the bottom, you can see there is blending that happens across these last three. Chemonics, for example, will call itself an NGO, a non-governmental organization, but it is not a non-profit organization. It doesn't have that tax status within the U.S. But you'll see, and of course, a lot of these organizations also do research and have rigorous researchers who are employed by them. Okay. A quick overview of some of the main drivers that affect the industry. First, I want to talk a little bit about the theoretical divide that continues to exist and be debated within international development. On the most extreme sort of points of view, on one side you have Jeffrey Sachs. Jeffrey Sachs and William Easterly are both very well-known American economists. Actually, let me start with William Easterly. He's sort of the mindset that we have spent billions of dollars of aid over the past however many decades, and we have little to show for it. A lot of it gets wasted. A lot of it is sucked up by corrupt systems. We're not doing a good job of choosing the programs that we support, and that we should actually be using fewer dollars to support fewer programs, but that are much more effective. And on the other hand, you have Jeffrey Sachs, who basically says, no, the problem is that we aren't putting enough money to invest in these programs. His concept is that there is a poverty trap that people are stuck in, and in order to bump them out of that trap so that they can be on a curve to work themselves out of poverty, to move out of poverty, you need more money and more programs. So this is a debate that is so current. It's been going on for a while. It will probably continue to go on for a while. And in fact, this is very timely. Jeffrey Sachs published an article, I think yesterday or the day before, in the Washington Post that says, here's what I would do. What I would do if I were the president of the World Bank. That post is becoming vacant soon, and he is clearly putting himself up as a contender. Here's what I would do if I were president of the World Bank. And the day after, William Easterly published an article in, I think, Foreign Policy magazine that said, here's what I would not do as World Bank president. So this is a very timely debate. It's still ongoing. And it's an important part of considerations, important set of considerations in the field. This is also a very complex area. You're not only dealing with actual real-life people, but you are having to deal with governments and donors, which other companies really don't. Shareholders are just not the same as donors. They're not as emotionally invested as donors tend to be. And you also have work that, as I mentioned before, you don't get to see results immediately. Multiple stakeholders, of course, and I think another important driver that I want to mention internally is a focus on sustainability. By sustainability, I really mean enabling local capacity. So in other words, we don't need, once you as an organization, as a Western, let's say, organization are coming into a developing nation, the goal is to actually enable and equip the local population, the local organizations to take the work forward, so that you don't have to keep coming back. And that's what we generally in the field mean by sustainability. There are also a number of external drivers. The biggest one right now are the economic pressures. With the economic downturn, most governments who donate to the international development industry are cash strapped. and those dollars tend to be some of the first to get cut. There's also a cycle of development fads. Many of you probably remember a number of years ago, microfinance was the hot thing. It was going to be the solution to poverty. You don't hear as much anymore about microfinance. You'll hear a lot more now about, say, the Millennium Development Goals, maternal and child health. Not to say that any of these solutions or any of these sectors are more important than another, but that donors have ideas and concepts that they latch onto and tend to support, and then they lose interest and they have another idea that they want to support. There's also this drive towards measurable performance. Donors are getting much more savvy, and they really want to, know that what they're giving money to has measurable impact. So not that you just built a school, but that you have indicators to show that the children are better educated. And then lastly, bad publicity. This is not necessarily unique to international development. I do, however, think that this field in general can sometimes be vilified, sometimes justly, sometimes unfairly, but it is another consideration and does affect a lot of the work that we do.